I'm here to remind all Iowans that in Christmas, in this state, we're going to still have Christmas. We're very firm in the fact that we expect to have the caucuses in January, and right now, obviously, nothing has changed in terms of dates. New Hampshire has not moved their date. We're still on the 14th, but I have made it very clear that to go into 2007 makes no sense at all. It's no common sense reason for us to move back the 2008 presidential selection process. So we're confident that working with our friends in New Hampshire, working with the Iowa State Democratic Party, working with the Democratic National Committee, that Iowa will once again lead off the presidential selection process in 2008 with the First in the Nation caucus here. And we have had very good conversations with our friends at the DNC, with Bill Gardner in New Hampshire. And obviously the situation is fluid, but nothing really has changed in terms of the dates between Iowa and New Hampshire. And until New Hampshire makes a change, we are scheduled for the 14th of January. But we have no interest in going in December for a lot of reasons. One being that this is the 2008 presidential selection process, and delegates are supposed to be selected starting in 2008. With that, I will turn it over to the Secretary of State, Mike Mauro, and then the Chairman, Scott Brennan, will fill you in on conversations that they have had with key players in this process, and then we will all be happy to take some questions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. A couple things just on the front end of this. You know, the Secretary of State's role in Iowa is really not to be involved in the caucuses. It's done by the parties, financed by the parties, and paid for by the parties. I do have relationships with other Secretary of States, and one of them is Bill Gardner from New Hampshire, and Governor Culver, he was Secretary Culver, also had a great relationship with Mr. Gardner, and I've had conversations with him, and in those conversations, what I want to relay is that New Hampshire said all along, and I believe it to be accurate, they want to work with Iowa. They're not making any attempt to force us into anything particular. They have certain rules and regulations they have to live within, but they do want a relationship with Iowa. They want to work with Iowa. They think their tradition, and Secretary Gardner said this over and over again, is very important. And there's a lot at stake, and there's a lot at stake for Iowa. There's a lot at stake for New Hampshire, and we need to maintain that tradition, and we need to work together. So from that standpoint, as a colleague in the Secretary of State's office, I can assure you that New Hampshire is going to work with Iowa, and Iowa is going to try to work with them. And of course, we're going to try to stay in January. That's really all I have to add at this particular time. Thank you.
Thanks. And I don't have a lot new to add other than obviously on behalf of the party, we have been talking to the DNC, we've been talking to our friends in New Hampshire, we've been talking to South Carolina, we've been talking to Nevada. And so, you know, the process is fluid. The calendar has not been finally set yet. And at this point, we still intend to go forward on the 14th. And as the governor clearly stated, we will go forward in January of 2008. Thank you.
Questions?
I was actually in New Hampshire yesterday, and Secretary Gardner said that his date, the 22nd, was actually never a real date, and according to his state law now, at the earliest it would be the 12th. When do you think that the Iowa caucuses could potentially be?
Well, it really depends on what Secretary Gardner decides to do. And until he makes a definitive decision, we would be purely speculating. So for now, we're set on the 14th. That's all we can tell you, according to DNC rules. Yes?
If necessary, will you forego our 8-day law?
And we will do everything that it takes to keep Iowa first, to have the caucus in January, and to keep our relationships intact with the party and our friends in New Hampshire.
Does that mean calling a special session or waiting until legislators come back in January?
Well, I think all options are on the table at this point. Again, nothing has happened in terms of the New Hampshire date to force us to do one thing or another. And I might add that it was the Republican Party of South Carolina that moved. The Democratic Party of South Carolina is going to stay. So it really clearly is in the hands of Secretary of State Gardner in terms of when he picks the date for New Hampshire, and then we will put all options on the table to protect our first in the nation status.
Do you have a timetable, expectation of when the New Hampshire Secretary will make his decision?
That is a great question for him. And
You haven't had any conversations with him to get?
No, I think he is going to make that decision when he's prepared. And historically, he has waited. I think the other thing that is helpful here is I've been through this twice before as the Secretary of State when we went through the 2000 and 2004 presidential selection process. I was very involved and had a close relationship with Secretary Gardner, and historically he has waited to pick the date. So when he does that, it's not clear, and until he does, we're on January 14th.
If it requires you to move ahead because Gardner moves his date, what assurances have you had in the discussions that you've described with the DNC that your delegates will get seated?
That has got to be a part of the discussion, I'm confident that it will be. You know, we want to do everything within the rules. We want to have our delegates seated. Iowa has worked for a long time, since 1972, to have the honor of leading off the presidential selection process. That didn't happen by accident. We've always worked within the party rules. We've always communicated with our colleagues in New Hampshire, and we've done it again this cycle. So any decision that we make in the future will continue to include discussions with the state of New Hampshire and with the Democratic National Committee.
So when you say that you're confident, you're suggesting that in the conversations that you've had with the DNC, they've signaled that your delegates will still be allowed to come to the convention?
Our delegates will be seated.
Governor, two-part question. Have you talked to Republicans here in Iowa about this? And secondly, is there any talk, going back to what Iowa did prior to 1980, which was you had separate caucus nights? You had Democrats on one night and you had Republicans on a different night. Is that an option here?
I'll really turn that over to Chairman Brennan, and he has, in fact, the staff here has communicated with the Republican Party of Iowa, and I'll let him fill you in on that.
We have talked to the Republican Party. Obviously, they're a little focused on other things right now because they have the straw poll tomorrow, but we've at least talked to them. I mean, you know, the intention is always, and the history has been, that both parties go forward at the same time, and so we'll be in consultation with them as we go forward. And I didn't follow your second part, David.
Separate nights, which is the way it was in this state prior to 1980. They have one night, you have it on a different night.
I think New Hampshire will drive that. But the intention has always been that both parties go forward on the same night.
Monday? A Monday? Does it have to be a Monday?
No.
What happened, it does seem that you're working with New Hampshire and you're going to try to resolve this, but let's put them out of the way. Michigan is threatening to come in and really disrupt what is already a process that's kind of in chaos. So what happened with Michigan?
I mean, again, that goes back to what the governor said. I mean, speculation. Michigan hasn't done anything at this point. The point's been made to the DNC that we expect the DNC to force the state parties to adhere to the calendar, and we'll wait and see what happens.
Governor, what am I to make of the fact that the Secretary of State of New Hampshire and the Republican State Chairman of South Carolina are together in Concord yesterday, but nobody from Iowa was there? Is this a sign that Iowa is going to get boxed out and the deal cut by New Hampshire and South Carolina?
No. In fact, Secretary Gardner has made it very clear he has no intention of pushing Iowa into December. He's also made it clear that he wants to continue to work with our state, and what they decide to do was their decision. And we are worried about Iowa at this point. That is our sole focus on making sure that Iowa leads off the presidential selection process. The difference, David, I think, is that Bill Gardner has the power to set the date by himself. We have a different set of rules. And so he can go have press conferences around the country and talk to different states about doing different things because he sets the date. We are working with a larger group that includes our state party, the DNC, and colleagues around the country.